Now there's all kinds of workflows to creating an animation, and you're gonna find the one that works the best for you. For me, I think creating my basic artwork in regular Procreate, importing that into Procreate Dreams, and then adding all the motion effects and seeing what else needs to move around is the best way to do it. Simply because, as I said before, there were extra tools in regular Procreate and I'm more familiar in drawing with it. I have more space to work in. When you create your artwork in regular Procreate, you have to think about what do you want to have move and what do you want to have stable. So I'm going to do a very basic face, and I might want the eyes to move, so I'll put that on a different layer. If we were doing this in Photoshop, it'd be easy to break up in post, but that is a thing that's a little more difficult to do in Procreate, so best to think of these things ahead of time. And if you aren't sure, make them on different layers anyways, because you can always combine them down and flatten them. The hair is going to get its own layer, and if I have a bit of hair that's going to dangle in front, that's going to get its own layer too. The parts of the face that aren't going to move, like the nose or the ears, I'm going to go ahead and keep on the original face layer. Depending if this was an animation where the person talked, I would draw the different mouth shapes. Mouth shapes are something that I've animated a lot because I use Adobe Character Animator. That's a motion capture software, and it reads audio and matches the various mouth shapes. But in preparation for a lot of my own animations, I've just created like a universal set of mouth shapes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look up the word phonemes or visemes, but generally there's like a neutral, a smile, like the letter F involves people biting their bottom lip, the letter L involves them putting their tongue behind their teeth, and so on and so forth. Those are things that I've created. I already have a mouth set, and I can always import that into any animation, whether it's a 3/4 view of a face, a side view of a face, so on and so forth. So we have these bits here, and if I was to add extra hair details, I would put them on their own layer, and then of course any sort of color. Now personally, I don't take the effort to rename all my layers. That would be the smart thing to do. I can usually see pretty well on the screen what they are, but things like the hair details, I'm going to group those, which is a little right swipe and then group. And if you make a mistake and group something extra, like I did this face, you can go ahead and bounce that out of the group. And if you forget something, go ahead and add it to the group. Now my groups I do name because they tend to be a little more complicated to see exactly what's going on in them. If it was things that I drew on several layers and wanted to totally combine, I would flatten all the artwork down. That makes life so much easier in Procreate Dreams. Whatever you're working with is flat, but because it's a hair group and I want to move these individual pieces on their own, I'm going to keep them separate. The only other thing that I think I want to add to this is a little bit of a color fill behind everything. Because currently there's no color, and when you turn off the background color, it's just line work. I tend to use this really messy method of coloring. I don't know why, it appeals to me to have these Jackson Pollock-esque dots that bounce outside of the artwork. Most of the animation that I love personally is very stylized, stuff like Spider-Verse, or films like Boy in the World, The Girl Without Hands. These are not very standard styles of animating. And so I think having some unusual choices, very distinctive choices in what you do is pretty important. Be different if I worked for Disney. The color of this hair is going to be an example of artwork that I do need to flatten. If I was to paint the color on the same layer as this, I'm painting over it. So I need to paint it on a different layer, but once it's animated, I'll want these things to work in unison. If this hair blows or warps, then the color needs to warp along with it. Also, I need to do color on individual layers because this little bit that's dangling over is going to move independently on its own too. So color needs to go just for this one, and then this group, this dangly hair bit, this is an example of something that I would flatten, and now it's one piece. So this layer that accompanies that portion of the hair, Group those. Did not want this in the group. Pull it out. There we go. And I can see when I move these off that there's portions of the head that I forgot to color. It's kind of important to get everything behind the hair, because at some point in the animation, the hair may move out of place, and then he's got part of his cranium that's exposed. There we go. Color to the clothing, and then I am coloring a little bit over lines, but that's just a matter of reordering everything. If the shirt goes behind the jacket, then it's down here. These are all parts of the clothes, so group those. And if they aren't going to be moving or animated, then I'll flatten that one down as well. Take Procreate Dreams. I might use this guy for a social media explainer type video, so go ahead and create social video, import the artwork. We'll worry about the mouths and the audio later, but as we can see, he's imported as a single track. Okay, so I have my character imported, and I'm thinking of making some sort of Instagram reel, TikTok, YouTube short, some kind of short form video where this guy talks about something. So I'll draw some mouths onto him when I need to, but first I want to talk about tracks. Tracks are these areas down below that have all your information. It could be your visual, in this case it says drawing. It could be audio, which is not under the list of the tracks, but it is something you can import with files. It could be text, meaning if I go into text, I could actually type out something to appear on the screen and animate that text as well. It could be a video track, it could be a photo, it could just be a blank track, it could be another drawing. Same as pretty much any other kind of video editor, motion graphics editor that you'll ever see. There's a timeline, it corresponds to seconds, and we have a playhead, which I'm moving around right here. The playhead has some options within it where you can do animations and effects. You can do them live, meaning that there's a recording, and I'm gonna go ahead and just show you move and scale being recorded with the record button. So I move this thing around. We go back to the beginning of our track. We see the movements taking place. The other choices you have involve warping, distorting, changing the opacity, meaning that you can start to see through things. You can take the opacity down to 0 all the way. And we'll start our playhead beginning. You can see that this character fades in the duration of the opacity that I just did. If you don't want it to be a performance, if you don't want it to be an animation, you just want it to happen, naturally on the screen, don't have the record icon picked. And now any effect that you apply, like move or scale, it's always like that. It's not a animation that takes place across the timeline. Also within the playhead are the few filters that you have: the blurring, sharpening, noise, and HSB is hue, saturation, and brightness. This is where you can do some slight filtering. Anyways, if you don't like any of these changes, any of these effects, you tap the icon, hold it, and then you can either delete the keyframe or delete the effect entirely. So right now I have one track, which is my character. I'm going to go ahead and scale him by tapping him and moving these red transform dots around. I need to have access to more tracks because I want at least his hair to move around. So I'm going to hold my content, convert layers to tracks, and then now it says group, twirl down on the group, twirl down on the hair, and now I can see the tracks I have within the hair. One of these, layer 6, is totally blank, just something that was a leftover from when I was making my art in Procreate. So I'm going to go ahead and hold this and delete content and delete the track. Layer 12 is my little dangly bit of hair. Now this dangly bit of hair, if I was to select the track, pick it up and move it, you can see it for what it is. And if this is going to move at all in my animation, if it's going to have some sort of physics to it, like gravity or wind affecting it, the movement needs to be really subtle. And also, if I was to show you what warp does, I don't want it to look stupid. And I think that's what would happen if I did warp. So I'm just gonna gently rotate this. Delete these keyframes of warp. I think all it's called for is just a subtle rotation. And the way that you rotate things for animation is you tap the corner icon, so you see this little gray bit, and you just kind of move that corner gray bit around. I think that's good enough. Note that the anchor point is the center of my animation. The anchor point is that plus icon. So if I go too far, it's gonna look really bad. I think just a little bit here and there. Animation does not have to be wild and crazy all the time, but I think things need to move on the screen at all times. I think if you just leave a drawing not moving, or you only have a small part moving, like a mouth, but the rest of the head stays still, it's not really interesting to look at. That's kind of like the Hanna-Barbera animation of the 1960s, and it's just so cheap and it's unnecessary. We can very easily do subtle animation, the record icon, and I'm gonna pull out so I can see how many seconds I'm working with. We'll go to about 5 seconds for the purposes of this video. Just gonna subtly rotate it. Now, that works for that small bit of hair. The hair on top of the head, different story. I'll move my playhead to the beginning of the track, select the layer that has the rest of my hair in it, which is layer 11. Again, you can simplify your life quite a bit if you name your layers in Procreate. Prior to bringing it over to Procreate Dreams, tap the clapboard, select Move. I think Warp is going to work well. And you'll notice I have 4 points to this hair that should be moving around. Don't worry if you can only animate a small portion, if you can only warp one side of the hair, because you can always restart the playhead and animate the other side of the hair, and it'll do recordings of both. I'll go ahead and grab this upper right corner, and I'm just going to subtly move it around. This is what warp does. It changes the mesh. And I've gotten to 9 seconds. Restart my playhead. See the subtle warping of the hair? Very nice. Restart my playhead. Now I'm going to get the left side of his face. I'm going to grab the bottom from the right corner and just kind of warp it around. A little bit here, a little bit there. Restart my playhead. And now the hair looks like it's got a little gentle breeze going in it. So in this final bit, I'm going to open the Flipbook within my group of my character, which means that I'm going to be drawing within this shell, and each frame is not going to be a frame-by-frame animation. It's just going to be the mouth shapes that I need. This will translate to frames of those mouth shapes on my main timeline, and then I can stretch and place those with whatever dialogue I end up putting in the character. Whatever audio I end up dropping in, I'll put the correct mouth shape to go with the correct syllable. Where you'd find these mouth shapes if you were looking for reference, you can Google phoneme or viseme or cartoon mouth shape, and you'll find those. Each main letter group, though, has a particular mouth shape. As I mentioned before, if you say L, you are putting your tongue behind your top teeth. So that's pretty easy to illustrate. If you're doing an F, at some point, your top teeth are biting your bottom lip. You can draw whatever mouth shapes you need, however many you need, and if you want them to be multiple frame movement, for example, when someone says O, it's an literal O shape on their face, but there's always going to be some transition from the sort of long, straight, horizontal line that is our regular mouth into the O. So if you do 2 frames of motion for that, it's going to look smoother and a little nicer. I do try and take extra time on my mouth shapes, maybe even more time than I'm doing in this particular tutorial, because these are things that are going to be animated a lot if you're doing some sort of dialogue heavy animation illustration. You don't want to skimp on the time that you spend on doing mouth shapes. And if you add extra details like the little divot above the upper lip, or little shading on the bottom lip, shading in the corners of the mouth, it just makes the animation look more polished and professional. I don't know about drawing every single tooth on a person. I think sometimes that looks silly. It actually makes people's teeth look worse than if you just do sort of like the white line indicating upper teeth, bottom teeth. It's up to you. In a lot of my own personal drawings, I'll put all the taste buds on tongues and maybe even like fingerprints on fingers. And in one sense, that looks a little freaky when you see that as an animated character. So I'm not going to do that level of detail with these mouth shapes. I'm just going to do very basic ones so we can have our frames, and when we back out into the group of our character, check the mouse, make sure that they're all the right orientation, that they're in the right position. We'll do some adjustments using the transform tool on each frame. We'll scale them as needed, rotate them as needed, place them further up in the face or further down depending on how much I messed up when I did my Flipbook drawings. And now that I have my mouth shapes, I'm going to import my audio with this plus icon, find files, and I've already airdropped my dialogue, which is the very intro of this particular tutorial, onto my iPad. So it's called hello.wave. I'll add my wave file in, and I can see the waveform, which is the visual representation of audio. I know my syllables. First word is hello, that's 2 syllables. And of my mouth shapes, I have an E sound, I have an L sound, and I have an O sound. So even though hello is 2 syllables, I think I need all 3 of those particular shapes to illustrate hello. So this is the part where I have to start repositioning things, duplicating as needed, and spacing them out. I'm gonna put ELO for my hello. Hello, I'm David Miller. Hello, I'm David Miller. Hello, I'm David Miller. The number of mouth shapes you'd want to use for any dialogue can depend on how fast the character is talking and how accurate you want it to be. If you were thinking that this is a lot of work and you don't want to do this, then I would make some more generic mouth shapes and then just utilize them sparingly as needed. But if you're going to do something that's very dialogue heavy and talky, and you want your character to be more expressive, then a higher level of detail is needed in your projects. I would have more expressive stuff going on, like a variety of eyebrows, maybe some wrinkles on the face, more blinks, more things to happen with the character. This is something that I learned when creating motion capture characters in Adobe Character Animator, that the more animations that you give a character you design, the more lively they are and the more easy it is to get into watching them. I think that's why a lot of people have a hard time watching the old Hanna-Barbera stuff, because they are not very lively. They're very static. Same with a lot of the older anime, some of the older, cheaper stuff, that characters just don't emote and they don't move around that much. And compared to something like a Studio Ghibli film, where characters are very emotive, environments have emotion to them, everything just kind of like works towards a vibe and a feeling, and you can get so into it. You got to realize that you're competing on some level with other things vying for people's attention, and the more basic and boring your stuff is, the less likely it's going to get any eyeballs, less likely you are to communicate your message. So now that I've completed everything within my shell, and I have my character saying exactly what I want them to say, I can go out to my main group of my character and start doing some performance capture that emphasizes what the character is saying and doing. So if they are doing something that has extra emphasis, I may have their head rotate towards the audience a little bit. I might scale them up as if they are emphasizing a point just for that moment. You'll make life a lot easier for yourself if you do all the animations within a shell within the main group before you do your outer performance capture animation, because if you do the outer performance capture animation that contains everything, the hair, the face, the mouth shapes, stuff is going to be moving around when you're trying to make it move within the shell. It's just not worth your time to try and deal with that aggravation. I say do everything inside. Now you know what's going on and you can do performance as if you were an actor on a stage. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out my full 78-minute course on Procreate Dreams. The link is below. Best of luck to you in all your creative endeavors.